Hello everyone, this is 3D Printed Creature Part 13. I hope you're all doing well. I've been doing skull work on this animatronic and just a lot more designing. This piece here is the mouth part, or mouth cover that covers those forks as the lip mechanism. But this will allow the lip mechanism to go underneath that so-called mouth cover. There's a lot of design work in an animatronic. It's like making a clock or making anything, matter of fact. It has to be designed. But mainly here is that I'd have something for the silicone to attach to and not just be open there. But this mouthpiece right here, I just kind of connected all the pieces together just to get this one solid form. And then after I had this form made, I wanted to put a more smoother cover for the silicone to slide when it stretches. So I exported this STL part into Blender and made a cover. That way it looked more like a skull. When I got that lip cover, so what I did was I connected the so-called eyelid nut area. I made a little cavity there for me to be able to put the tool in. Plus, I made the stops for the skull. I had to also design another mesh that would flow underneath this so-called mouth cover and join into that mouth plate. The nut socket area has a stop on the top, and also I made stops or a flat area on these other side of the eyelids. This way I can have a placement key for the so-called skull lid. This is the first concept of the skull I did. Being low poly on this so-called skull lid, I needed to make a higher resolution, so I put it into Blender and did a subsurface modifier. You know, when modeling like CAD, it's usually squares, but when you're sculpting, everything's turned into triangles. So in the Blender sub modifier, it turned a lot of these things into like hexagon patterns. So I exported it into ZBrush and did also a Z remesher, and then it cleaned it up a lot. Even though it's still triangles, it just makes it so much smoother. And on that main plate, as far as what has the eyes, there's this so-called border that I've designed. It's mainly flat area, and this border is going to be the so-called thickness of the skull. And these stop plates are going to be keys for the skull to lay upon when I have everything designed for the skull itself. But I make adjustments to this new so-called skull piece, make flat cuts and just kind of get everything prepped for me to lay it to this border. There's areas in this where the lid goes down. I gotta just make sure I have clearance and tolerances correct so that way it will fit correctly. But the border and the key stops are all measured to so-called, like this extrusion here is part of the shell. And when I get all this put together, as you see here, I will reduce the skull again and fit it back inside the skull to produce the shell. There's a lot of back and forth going, you know, to Blender and to ZBrush, and it's just back and forth. You know, mainly I go into Blender just to manipulate. Like now I need to move this so-called new skull piece, and now I'm going to form it to that so-called eye socket border. And that eye socket border was that ring, or above the eye, and it's already a so-called shell piece already, and I will connect that inside to the lower part of that so-called ring. But once again, a lot of this is subject to change. It just all depends on how I want it to look. But also, I got to keep the inside thickness correct because I just don't want anything bumping. And plus, I also need room so I can attach the so-called magnets to the inside, and then they will be able to attach to that so-called scaffold. There's a lot of work to do on this skull, Ed. Not only to make it into a shell, I got to make some space cuts where the brows go, and that's the one above the eye, and also the forehead area right there in the center for its center brow. So I'm just going to check the stops to see if they match. And all I do is I just place it right there on top of that other stop. I did the lip cover, and it's being mounted to the so-called eyelid nut space area. And then I also did adjustments to this mouth plate. When I release the so-called mirror, there will be like 5 main pieces. That way it'll be less to print, but they're going to be the primary pieces of this animatronic. You will have the skull, you will have the scalpel, you will have the eyelid socket, and you will have the mouth, and then the jaw. Well, it's starting to look like a creature skull. Now you'll see me demonstrate how these so-called lip hinges will go underneath that lip cover. This video is 3D printed creature part 13, and this has been 3 weeks in making this. This is how far I've gotten. Now I'm going to start getting ready to do some test prints and see how everything is lining up. But I appreciate all my subscribers and the new ones. Hit that thumbs up button. It helps my channel. And please share this, and let's get everybody involved in animatronics. I'm going to add another servo to this, so we're going to probably have 12 servos in all. But once again, I thank everybody, and once again, thumbs up, comment, share. Appreciate y'all. Later.